I figured this would be kind of a cool video to do, just to give a little bit of a backstory on the Mustangs that I've owned in the past and what I plan on buying next. If you watch the channel, you most likely know what I'm buying next, but I'll throw that at the end of the video to see what I have planned for early next year. I'm going to do these pictures in order of how I purchased the cars from when I was young to the last one that I owned. Some of the Mustangs I don't actually have pictures of anymore, and when I show that particular car, I'll make the note that it's just a stock photo that I pulled from off the internet. Due to, passage of time and losing thumb drives and memory cards and stuff like that, some of the pictures have been lost over the years, and I don't have photos of all the cars that I've had. So we're going to start out with the very first Mustang that I ever bought. This was a 1966 coupe, and this is the actual photos of the car. I bought this when I want to say I was 16 or 17 years old, and that's what started the whole process for me of going down this road of getting a Mustang, and it stuck with me over the years. I've had many more since then, and I still want to buy more. Even with the one that I get next year, there are others that I want to buy. But back to this one, it was my first, dipping my feet into the water of getting into Mustangs and learning about them and the history, and it was a really cool car to have. And this was the very first car I ever bought that was like my car, and to have this in high school was really cool. And there's a photo of me back when I was a lot younger than I am now, but it was a great car. I liked it a lot. I had it for a few years. I think I bought it for around $3,000 or $4,000. So it was a good car. I definitely learned a lot while I had it, and it was neat. So that's car number one. The second Mustang that I bought, I don't have any actual photos of it because it's my least favorite Mustang that I've owned. I don't really remember ever taking that many photos of it, but it was a 1994 V6, and these are just stock photos that I pulled from off Google and off the internet. So there really wasn't much to say about this car. I did some exhaust mods to it. That was about it. And ironically, even though this was the Mustang that I disliked the most, that had the least amount of performance and the least amount of power, it's the only car that I've actually ever blown an engine on, which is really weird. But the only reason the engine did blow in this car was it had a stuck thermostat, and it wasn't circulating the coolant, which meant that everything overheated. And I didn't realize this because I didn't notice it on the gauge until it was too late. Everything on the car shut off, and I pulled over the side of the road, and it just went up in a big cloud of white smoke. And that was the end of car number two. Actually, I did have it for a while after that. I replaced the engine. It was like $700 to get a new one and to have it put in. And I had it for a little while beyond that point, but eventually did sell it and move on to the next one. The next Mustang that I bought, and the first one that I really started to do a lot of modifications on, was my 1995 GT. This had the 5-liter pushrod motor in it, and I did quite a bit on this car. The big thing was the Paxton Novi 2000 supercharger. I put that on with a friend of mine in his garage. I had other mods on it too. I had the Cobra intake, exhaust. I put on the Steeda Ultralight 2 wheels and the Stalker front bumper and the Celine S281 wing. It looked really, really good. I was happy with how the car looked. It's still to this day, I think it's a sharp looking car in that form. And I think I ended up making like around 330 horsepower with it, with the supercharger on it, which isn't a lot, but there wasn't a whole lot done to the car. It still had the stock heads, had the stock cam. The only real mods to it, performance-wise, were the upper intake, the Cobra intake, and the supercharger. So I was really restricted, and the exhaust modifications that I had done. So it was kind of restricted on how much power it could make, because that supercharger would support way more than that if I had gone down that road of putting more into it, but it just never happened before I ended up selling it and eventually moving on to the next Mustang. This next Mustang was a 1993 Fox body. I like this car quite a bit, although I didn't have it for very long. The ultimate plans with the car were to put I wanted to put a stroker motor in it. I was either going to do like a 410 or a 347 stroker or something along those lines. And these are not actual photos of the car. These are just ones that I pulled from offline. I do remember taking photos of the car, but for some reason I don't know where the pictures went to. They've just been lost over time, like I mentioned in the intro. And I can't remember how long I actually had the car for. It wasn't very long at all, but I ended up selling it. I had big plans for it. Like I said, I wanted to put a good stroker motor in it and stiffen up the chassis and the suspension and go that route with the car, but for whatever reason at the time it just never materialized. I don't know if I came to the conclusion that maybe I bit off more than I could chew and the project was going to be way more involved than I originally anticipated. But I eventually did end up selling this car as well and moving on to the 5th Mustang that I ended up owning. This Mustang I've covered quite a bit on the channel. I have a few videos on this already involving the entire backstory of the car. It has a very long and unique history, so I'll also leave a link to that video at the end of this one if you want to check that out. But this was my 1994 SVT Cobra that had a 1995 Cobra R drivetrain in it. It had the suspension, transmission, and the engine out of a 1995 Cobra R, meaning that it had a 351 Windsor in it. And I did a lot with this car. I mean, a lot. I probably spent more in modifications than what I did on the price of the car, which for a lot of people, it's not uncommon for that to happen when you get modding these cars like this. And the mod list is long. I don't want to go through the entire list for this video. If you want to find out everything with that car, I suggest going to watch my other video. I can go into a lot more in-depth stuff about it than I want to right here because I don't want the whole video to be taken up with just this one car. But there were a lot of suspension modifications, a lot of performance modifications done. I dragged this car a lot. I took it to the track a lot. It was a lot of fun. And I had this car for quite a long time before moving on from it and deciding to sell it. But with this car, I ended up making about 340 to 350 horsepower. The last modification combination that it had. It did have an upgraded combination that I never got the chance to dyno or take to the track, but that final configuration was custom CNC trick flow high port heads, long tube headers, and I put a Victor 5.8 EFI intake on it. With those 3 mods, and also had a custom grind camshaft. And with those mods, I never got the dyno numbers, but it would have made some really good numbers, I believe, NA. And that's pretty much the backstory that I want to go into with that car. And like I said, check out the other video to find out a lot more on it. Really cool history on the car. So that sums up all the Mustangs that I've owned, you know, since I was a teenager up to where I am now. And right now, I don't currently have one, but if you go back to my last video, which I'll also have linked at the end or in the description, you can see that I plan on buying a 2003 or 2004 Terminator Cobra next spring. The only thing I'm waiting on is paying off my F-150, and once that is paid off around next March or April, one of those 2 months, I'll throw down the rest of the money needed to pay it off and get it paid off. And then I'll be looking for a 2003 or 2004 Terminator. And at that point, this channel is going to be a lot of Terminator Cobra content. So if that kind of stuff interests you, if you want to see a lot of Cobra content as far as me building the car and some drag strip stuff, a lot of car show events I'm going to go to, in general, just videos with the car and just modifications and stuff like that. Even if I get the car and it's modded already, it's not going to be modded the way that I want it. So either way, it's going to go through a change, whether it's stock or already modded, and I go the route that I want to do with it. So that's pretty much it. That's a rundown of everything that I've owned and what I plan on buying in the near future. We're only, we're halfway through 2020, and 2021 is not that far away. And like I said, I plan on buying the Cobra in early 21. So I hope you enjoyed the video and seeing what Mustangs that I've owned in the past. Feel free to leave a comment for what Mustangs that you have owned before, or what you currently have, or what you plan on buying. like in my situation where I plan on buying the Cobra in just a little under a year. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it. If you like the video, throw it a like. If you want to come along for the adventure of building the Cobra once I get it, feel free to subscribe. And thank you for watching either way. And until next time.